We want to talk about drying a basement out, specifically the psychometry of drying a basement. It's necessary to have 4 components in drying out a structure, and specifically in a basement. The first component that we need is to dry the air in a basement. This is very important to wring the moisture out of the air and to make it dry. The second component is drying the moisture on any surfaces. Any type of moisture or condensation on the surfaces will need to be dried, and that's usually done by air movement. The third is air movement itself. Air movement is very important to be circulating down in the basement so as we can have that drying of the surface mechanic. The fourth is temperature in the basement. Temperature in the basement for optimum drying is 72 degrees Fahrenheit. And so the first component, air drying, we need to achieve we're looking for about a 55% relative humidity. And what that means is humidity in the air. And how to achieve that is by drying the air through dehumidifiers, and we also want to dry the air underneath the floor. This is often overlooked when installing dehumidification systems. It's true that most of the water in the basement or humidity in a basement comes from underneath the slab due to the wetness and water that is ever present underneath the basement floor. So it's important to address both the air in the living space or the storage space as well as underneath the slab. So the number 2 thing we want to do is moisture on the surfaces. We want to dry any moisture on the surfaces. It's very important. We achieve that by air movement. And using a heavy-duty dehumidifier is very important because usually these types of dehumidifiers have a fan unit built in it. We can also use other types of industrial drying units that can achieve the same by introducing air movement. In a basement, there's a whole house. In a whole house, there's a whole house effect. And the whole house effect is basically when heat rises in the home, the air escapes through the vents in by the chimney, the soffit vents, and the ridge vents. So what we want to do is get that air down towards the basement and achieve air movement as well. And then, of course, introduction underneath the slab of air movement to get that moisture out from underneath the slab. The third one is the actual air movement itself. And again, that's done by the same as number 2, which is dehumidifiers and reversing the whole house effect if possible. The fourth is the temperature to achieve maximum drying efficiency. 72 degrees Fahrenheit is the best temperature that we can achieve. And we can achieve this, again, it's usually cooler in a basement. By reversing the whole house effect, we can achieve that by drawing the air that's normally escaping through the roof down into the basement. So in a basement, it's normal for a basement to be wet, and we need to accept this fact. And that can happen anything from water tanks letting go to pipes leaking to water coming in from the water table. From rain, etc. So it's very normal for a basement to be dry, and we want to make sure that we do an initial drying, and then we want to maintain that condition in a dry environment. So to recap real quick, we have 4 components of psychometry, which is the science of drying. We have the air drying, and that's usually achieved by dehumidifiers. One that comes to mind is an air mop 2. It's a very good unit. It has a fan circulator. We want to dry air underneath the slab. There's a company that installs a system called the Dehumidivac. It dries the air from underneath the slab to reduce the moisture that comes into the basement. So these 2 parts are very important to be introduced into the basement. We want to dry moisture on surfaces by introducing air movement. It's very important, and this can be achieved again by the dehumidifier. We can also achieve this by drawing air that's normally escaping through the roof by a system called the Dehumidivac or a Bon Air. And these systems are introduced into the basement, and basically it draws the air from upstairs down into the basement, getting that not only the equilibrium of the temperature the heat going up through the roof now is brought down into the basement, achieving a perfect temperature, but it's also having air movement into the basement itself, and achieving a temperature of 72 degrees Fahrenheit. And that can easily be achieved by utilizing a Bon Air or humidivac in the basement to draw that warm air that's normally escaping back down into the basement and equalizing the temperature. With all four components, you should have a dry environment ready for storage or for a new living space.